this one. So, Assalamualaikum class. So we're gonna do chapter 2 today, sustainability and human values. We were already doing this and we'll continue with it. Okay, so sustainability हमने discuss कर ली थी that what is sustainable development, that we live on this planet in a way that we consume stuff in a way that does not compromise its availability to future generations. ठीक है, तो कंजम्पशन हम उसकी जो प्रेजेंट कंजम्पशन है उसको इस तरह से कंज्यूम करें चीज़ों को कि फ्यूचर जनरेशंस के लिए भी उनकी नीड्स के लिए चीज़ें बच जाएं. Economic growth that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Okay, three factors जो हैं environmentally sound decision making, environmentally valid, viable decisions and socially equitable decisions. ठीक है, these would be the three aspects जिनके पर हम फोकस करेंगे, जिनकी बेसिस से हम एक सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट अचीव कर सकते हैं, जिनकी वजह से हमारी जो इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट है वो सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट के ऊपर हो सकती है. ओके, इकोनॉमिकली साउंड डिसीजंस, ऐसे डिसीजंस जो इकोनॉमिकली साउंड हो, जिनके अंदर कोई इशू ना हो इकोनॉमिक पर्सपेक्टिव के अंदर, के सस्ते पड़ते हों. ठीक है, तो वो करने से हमें कोई एनवायरमेंटल डैमेज करने से बच सकते हैं हम, तो दैट इज वेरी गुड. So they do not harm the environment or deplete the natural resources. For example, अगर आप ने स्विस आल्प्स का आपको पता है कि स्विस आल्प्स के ऊपर जब उन्होंने रोड्स बनाई हुई हैं तो वहां पर अक्सर माउंटेन से रॉक्स आकर फैल कर जाती है, रोड के ऊपर रोड ब्लॉक हो जाती है क्योंकि माउंटेन के ऊपर से अक्सर रॉक्स आती रहती हैं, जिसे हम लैंडस्लाइडिंग कहते हैं. अब उसके अंदर होता यह है कि अक्सर जहां पर ऐसी डेंजरस एरियाज होते हैं जहां से अक्सर खतरा होता है तो वहां पर उन्हें फेंसिंग करनी पड़ती है. तो दे फाउंड आउट कि जो नेचुरल यहाँ का हैबिटेट था, जो ट्रीज थे, अगर उन्हीं को वापस प्लांट कर दिया जाए तो ये जो हमारी फेंसिंग है इसकी नीड खत्म हो जाती है और इसकी जो मेंटेनेंस है उससे 10 टाइम्स लेस मेंटेनेंस के ऊपर वो ट्रीज ऑटोमेटिकली ये प्रोटेक्शन देंगे. सो दे आर नाउ इन्वेस्टिंग इन दैट. तो इकोनॉमिकल भी है और साउंड डिसीजन भी है. नेक्स्ट थिंग, सोशली इक्विटेबल डिसीजन. ठीक है, अब सोशल इक्विटेबल डिसीजन क्या है कि जो सबके लिए बराबरी के ऊपर सबको, सोशल इक्विटी बेसिकली होती है कि सबको एक इक्वेलिटी के साथ ट्रीट किया जाए, कि सबको उनके हिसाब से चीजें मिले. जैसे कि फॉर एग्जांपल, व्हाट कुड बी सोशली इक्विटेबल, आई कैन फाइंड एन एग्जांपल राइट नाउ. अगर मेरे माइंड में कोई एग्जांपल आती है तो मैं आपको शेयर कर देता हूँ. Okay, socially equitable decisions that reflect need of society and ensure costs and benefits are shared equally by all groups. ठीक है, आई डोंट नो हम इसे सोशली इक्विटेबल कह सकते हैं. जैसे स्ट्रीट लाइट्स होती हैं तो वो कॉस्ट जो है वो सोसाइटी शेयर करती है. यूजुअली द रिच पीपल वुड बी द पेइंग वन, जो टैक्स दे रहे होंगे और बेनिफिट सब उठा रहे होंगे उससे, मे बी. लेकिन आई डोंट थिंक दिस इज सोशल इक्विटी. सोशल इक्विटी कुछ डिफरेंट कॉन्सेप्ट है, वो मैं जरा आपको उसके लिए फोटो वगैरह से एक्सप्लेन करने की कोशिश करूंगा. देन इकोनॉमिकली वायबल डिसीजंस. ठीक है, हम वो डिसीजंस करें जो इकोनॉमिकली वायबल भी हों. ठीक है, उस डिसीजन की हर कॉस्ट को कंसीडर किया जाए, इवन एनवायरमेंटल कॉस्ट को कंसीडर किया जाए, सोशल कॉस्ट को कंसीडर किया जाए और लॉन्ग टर्म के अंदर देखा जाए कि इससे क्या बेनिफिट होगा, क्या ये इकोनॉमिकली वायबल होगा लॉन्ग टर्म के अंदर. ठीक है, सो ऐसा कोई भी प्रोजेक्ट के जिसके अंदर हम उसकी तमाम कॉस्ट को देखें. For example, okay, consider all costs include long-term environmental and societal costs. This all leads to sustainable development. Okay, so the challenges that we face, one of those would be the eradication of poverty. For example, in this figure 2.2, you can see a homeless man eating lunch at a mission in Seattle, Washington, where so many people are homeless. And in B, you can see the garbage litters that the yard around an orphanage in Kolkata, India. Okay, moving on to a concept of sustainable consumption. Okay, what is sustainable consumption? The use of goods and services that satisfy basic human needs and improve the quality of life, but that are also minimize resource use. Okay, that will also minimize the resource use. So basic human needs को satisfy कर सके हम, ये sustainable consumption है कि हम basic human needs सारी की सारी जो हैं सर्विसेज, जो भी गुड्स और सर्विसेज की उनकी ह्यूमन नीड्स है उनको सेटिस्फाई करें, बट जो टू इम्प्रूव देयर क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ, बट जो रिसोर्स यूज या रिसोर्स वेस्टेज है उसको मिनिमाइज किया जाए, कि मिनिमम रिसोर्स यूज करते हैं सारी नीड्स और सर्विसेज जो फूड और गुड्स और सर्विसेज की हैं वो प्रोवाइड की जा सके. ओके, लेट्स मूव ऑन टू दिस वन. इसका एग्जांपल के लिए, फॉर एग्जांपल, इफ यू सी द लाइट बल्ब ऑप्शंस इन फिगर 2.3, ये जो A से you can see B, then C, and then D. The years are the development of the light bulb over these years. Okay, this was the oldest one, the Edison one, then the newer one. Then it was improved to this energy saver ones, and now the LED ones. Incandescent light bulb has been used in the United States for over 130 years with little change between the original made by Thomas Edison. जो ए के अंदर दिया हुआ ये मेरे को पता है, ये थॉमस एडिसन ने बनाया था. एंड द मॉडर्न बल्ब जो बी था, ये आप देख सकते हैं कि थॉमस एडिसन वाला और ये जो मॉडर्न बल्ब है, दे आर मच नॉट मच डिफरेंट, दे आर रफली द सेम थिंग एंड दे यूज रफली द सेम अमाउंट ऑफ इलेक्ट्रिसिटी. ठीक है. हाउएवर कॉम्पैक्ट फ्लोरेसेंट सी, जो ये आपके ये वाले हैं जो दिस इज कॉल्ड द एनर्जी सेवर यहाँ पर कहा जाते हैं, दीज वंस, and light emitting diodes जो LEDs हैं ये, these are technologies that provide equivalent lighting with a fraction of the energy consumption, so they actually use much less energy than these. This would be a 100 watt bulb, this would be just 18 watts, and this might even not be even 18, and this might be just 3 or 5 watts, then it would have equivalent light, all of them. So it's better to use these. This would be sustainable consumption. Okay, now human values and environmental problems. So environmental ethics, what environmental ethics? A field of applied ethics that consider the moral basis of environmental responsibility. Environmental worldview, a worldview based on how the environment works, our place in the environment, and right and wrong environmental behaviors. Okay, that would be the environmental worldview. Then the Western worldview, a worldview based on human superiority over nature, the unrestricted use of natural resources, and economic growth to manage an expanding industrial base. Okay, that would be the Western worldview, that you have control over all the natural resources, you are unrestricted to use all those natural resources, and economic growth and managing and expanding the industrial base is the basic objective of this worldview. There is an environmental worldview, seeks to see how the environment works, our place in that environment, our role in that environment, and right and wrong environmental behaviors. That this would be a right environmental behavior. We can, for example, use certain things in a responsible way. However, we cannot just keep on cutting down the forests. That would be unethical. That would be wrong. Okay, and then comes in the deep ecology worldview, a worldview based on harmony with nature, a spiritual respect for life. Okay, that means that we should have harmony with nature, that we should live with nature, not against it. We should not go against the nature and just destroy all the grasslands and the old types of habitats and make it, to replace it with concrete. Yeah. Spiritual respect for life, again, we should not just keep on killing all the animals and destroy their habitats and finish off species, not just keep on hunting. And the belief that humans and all other species have an equivalent worth. So we believe that all species, they are equal, so not that humans are superior, but that all species are equal. Western worldview, you can see figure 2.5, a logging operation in 1884. This huge log jam occurred at the St. Croix River near Tyler's Falls, Minnesota. Why? Due to the pile up of wood, or that because that so much wood was being cut, and because it is heavy, it is expensive to transport wood through the roads, and especially back in the 1884s. So they would just throw those logs into the river, and the river would take it downstream. But with the Western worldview in operation today, these logs were cut from plantations of non-native eucalyptus trees, which have replaced 30 million hectares, 75 million acres of tropical rainforest in Brazil's Atlantic forest. Okay, so these were replaced. Now they're cutting these woods because they are not the native species, and they can be replaced with the native species. Okay, the combination of all these views. So you can see that the Western worldview is the organisms valued for their utility, for the value they have, for what they can be used for, and then the deep ecology worldview where the organisms are valued for their own sake, for their own potentials. Okay, and what we are interested in, these are intrinsic value, these are industrial values, institutional values. Now, our goal, or what we are interested in conserving and sustainable development, is this overlapping area to conserve humans and non-human life both at the same time. Moving forward, environmental justice. Okay, in the early 1970s, the Board of National Ministries of the American Baptist Churches coined the term eco-justice to link social and environmental ethics. At the local level, eco-justice encompasses environmental inequalities faced by low-income minority communities. Many studies indicate that low-income communities and communities of color are more likely than others to have chemical plants, hazardous waste facilities, central landfalls, sewage treatment plants, and incinerators built close to them. For example, over here in figure 2.8, you can see a children's playground overlooks a pulp mill. Poor minority neighborhoods often have the most polluted and degraded environments. Yeah, this is from Kingsport, Tennessee. Okay, so environmental justice, the right of every citizen to adequate protection from environmental hazards. Okay, irrespective of the creed, caste, color, and race. However, it has been observed, ये देखा गया है कि usually जो unprivileged areas होंगे, जो under impoverished होंगे, या जो of the color हैं, for example, they would be the poor people in even in the states, ये states की example share हो रही हैं, तो they would be the poor people. So उनकी communities ऐसे areas में जहाँ पर cheap land available, तो usually these plants and all these industries and all these waste treatments and waste dumps, landfills, they're all located near to them as compared to the rich, impoverished people. So you can see environmental insight, a plan for sustainable living. Okay, this is how we can have a sustainable living world. Figure 2.9. Uh, for example, in the first object, one of the first objective of sustainable living would be family planning in Egypt. Yes, the example आपने share किया, a woman at a health clinic in Egypt learns about family planning and birth control. Recommendation one: eliminate poverty and stabilize the human population. That is one of the goals of environment of sustainable development, because a rapidly growing population would keep on increasing poverty and the problems for the world. Moving on, restoration in Indonesia. Mangrove trees are planted at low tide to help restore a coastal estuary. Okay, why? Because these would have been destroyed previously for any particular reasons, and they would increase the chances of flooding. So the second recommendation is protect and restore Earth's resources. So, for example, the forests that have been degraded, they need to be restored. The areas that used to be natural sanctuaries, they need to be restored. Then feeding the world's people. Farmers in Cameroon harvest potatoes. Okay. Now the third recommendation, important recommendation, provide adequate food for all people. So such crops need to be used that can provide or feed most of the people in the world so that no one goes hungry. Energy neutral construction. This would be our fourth recommendation. Photovoltaic panels cover a south-facing wall of the Solaire, a building in Battery Park City, New York. Increasingly, energy is generated at buildings where it is used. So the fourth recommendation is mitigate climate change and be carbon neutral or energy neutral constructions. Lastly, bicycle rack in Amsterdam. The fifth recommendation, residents in the Netherlands ride bicycles on average of 573 miles per year. So this recommendation is design sustainable cities that would support pedestrian traffic and bicyclers as compared to traffic. So we have already discussed all these recommendations: eliminate poverty and stabilize the human population. Okay, so the ultimate goal of economic development is to make it possible for humans throughout the world to enjoy long, healthy lives. A serious complication lies in the fact that the distribution of the world's resources is unequal. Residents of the United States are collectively the wealthiest people who have ever existed with the highest standards of living. The United States, with fewer than 5% of the world's people, controls about 25% of the world's economy, but depends on other nations for this prosperity. Yet we often seem unaware of this relationship and tend to understand or underestimate our efforts on the environment that support us. And you can see in the figure 2.10, children at work. These girls are not at school because they are employed as weavers at looms in the workshop in Cambodia. Okay, now the carrying capacity. We have already discussed this concept, the maximum population that can be sustained by a given environment or by the world as a whole. So that would be the maximum population that the world could support. That is the carrying capacity of the world. Recommendation to protect and restore Earth's resources. To build a sustainable society, we must preserve the natural systems that support us. The conservation of non-renewable resources such as oil and minerals is obvious, although discovered of new supplies of non-renewable resources sometimes gives the illusion that they are inexhaustible. Renewable resources such as forests, biodiversity, soil, fresh water, and fisheries must be used in ways that ensure their long-term productivity. The capacity for renewal must be understood and respected. However, non-renewable resources have been badly damaged over the past 200 years until environmental sustainability became a part of the economic calculations. Susceptible natural resources will continue to be consumed unsustainably, driven by short-term economics. So, for example, we fished out almost all the whales in the world. We fished out almost most of the fish in the world. We did overfishing over the past centuries, and as a result, now we are facing a shortage of fisheries, and have destroyed the habitats of whales and other fishes. So it needs to be protected, and the economic calculations must incorporate these costs as well. And quotas have to be set up for fishing. For example, nowadays several countries have set up quotas, and they have an inspector on board the ships, these large ships that go out to sea for catching fish. And that inspector inspects the size of the fish, the type of the catch, and based on that they calculate that how much new quotas should be issued. So for example, if there is a good catch, they'll increase the quota. If there is a bad catch, they'll reduce the quotas. The world's forest, many of the world's forests are being cut, burned, or seriously altered at a frightening rate. In many parts of the developed world, old growth forests are rare and becoming more so. Much of the England's forests were cut down centuries ago to build ships and produce charcoal for fuel. As North America was colonized, forests were first harvested along the eastern seaboard. With expansion of the United States and Canada, forests on the west coast were exploited for construction, papermaking, and fuel. Similarly, loss of biodiversity. We have a clear interest in protecting Earth's biodiversity and managing its sustainably because from uh, we obtain from living organisms all our food, most medicines, and many buildings and clothes materials, biomass for energy, and numerous other products. In addition, organisms and the natural environment provide an array of ecosystem services without which we would not survive. These services include the protection of watersheds and soil, the development of fertile agricultural land, the determination of both local and climate and global climate, and the maintenance of habitats for animals and plants. So, what is biological diversity? The number and variety of Earth's organisms. Okay, that is biological diversity, or biodiversity, we call it. So having a biodiversity helps us maintain a good relationship with nature, and as a result we take a lot of services free of cost from these diverse creatures. Okay, so for example, you would know, or I don't know if you guys don't know, for example, the black scorpion. So it is very popular and it is highly priced, so it is super expensive because the venom, it is used to make medicines. For example, we cannot just kill of all the snake species, because to make anti-venom, we need the same venom of the snake to make the anti-venom. Similarly, most of these venoms in different species, they're actually used to make painkillers. So you need all those species to be able to provide medicine. So, for example, we never know which particular plants or animal species we will be able to use to cater to a particular type of disease or a new disease that comes along. For example, I was sharing this about the black scorpion. So the black scorpion's sting, its venom is actually used to make medicines for the AIDS patients. Moving on, recommendation 3, provide adequate food for all people. Globally, more than 800 million people lack access to the food needed for healthy, productive lives. This estimate, according to a 2011 report by the Union Food and Agriculture Organization, includes a high percentage of children. Children are particularly susceptible to food deficiencies because their brains and bodies cannot develop properly without adequate nutrition. Most malnourished people live in rural areas of the poorest developing nations. The link between poverty and food insecurity is inescapable. Since 2002, price increases have contributed to food insecurity worldwide. We can see this in figure 2.12. We go to this figure. Food insecurity. What is food insecurity? The condition in which people live with chronic hunger and malnutrition. That is food insecurity. Right here. So food volatility since 2002, figure 2.12, you can see since 2002, the food price index has actually changed a lot since 2002 till 2010. From 1975 until the end of the last century, global food prices were mostly in decline. However, beginning in 2002, food prices have been both increasing and less predictable. Food prices index in the price of the food as compared to the price in 2002 adjusted for inflation. So you can see till 2002 it was roughly falling down the food prices, but since then it is unpredictable and it has started to rise again. And then damage to soil resources, we can see erosion is a serious form of soil degradation careful stewardship of the land prevents such damage. Okay, but we do not do it. This is some sort of erosion in Kenya. Recommendation 4: mitigate climate change. A widely discussed human effect on their environment is climate change caused by the enhanced greenhouse effect. Okay, what is an enhanced greenhouse effect? The additional warming produced by increased levels of gases that absorb infrared radiation. Both highly developed and developing countries contribute to major increases in CO2 in the atmosphere, as well as to the increasing amount of methane, nitrous oxide, tropospheric ozone, and CFCs. The most important greenhouse gas, CO2, is produced when we burn fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. And again, one more thing, although methane natural gas is more greenhouse 10 times more effective in trapping heat as a greenhouse gas than CO2. However, see, we are focusing on the importance of CO2 because carbon dioxide, because this is what we get when we burn coal, oil, and natural gas, and as a result we release CO2 in the atmosphere, and this is one of the major contributors. We do not usually release the natural gas into the atmosphere. It is actually burnt, so most of it is actually gone as CO2. However, methane is actually a greenhouse gas which is 10 times more uh, severe than CO2. Although Earth's climate has been relatively stable during the past 10,000 years, human activities are causing it to change. The average global temperature increased by over 1 degree Celsius during the past century. More than half of that warming occurred since 1975. So to show you this process, let me show you this process diagram. Cascading responses of increased carbon dioxide through the environment, figure 2.14. So most people know that an increase in atmospheric CO2 leads to global warming, but this phenomena is far from a single cause and effect relationship. Increasing CO2 may cause a cascade of interacting responses throughout the Earth systems. So effect of increased atmospheric CO2 on the ocean. So you have the coral bleaching. Then, as a matter of fact, this increase in atmospheric CO2 leads to increase in dissolved CO2 in the ocean. Changes in ocean's chemistry, more acidic हो जाता है ocean, ठीक है, ocean ज़्यादा acidic हो जाएगा तो harm to coral reefs or animals होगा with shells, because the animals with shells cannot build their shells when the ocean is more acidic, because acid उसके shell को burn कर देता है, remove कर देता है. और कोरल रीफ जो है वो क्योंकि अपना शेल बनाते हैं वो भी, और वो भी उनका शेल नहीं बन सकता. चेंजेस इन ओशन फूड वेब डायनामिक्स. ओके, उसके जो फूड वेब के डायनामिक्स वो चेंज है क्योंकि कुछ स्पीशीज अपना शेल नहीं बना सकती, वो भी डिस्ट्रॉय हो जाती हैं. जो कोरल्स हैं वो भी डिस्ट्रॉय हो रहे हैं, जो कि हैबिटेट्स हैं फॉर लॉट ऑफ स्पीशीज. एंड इंक्रीज एक्सटिंक्शंस. Oh, sorry. So I think my mic was turned off because I was disconnected and I reconnected. So I don't know what happened. So let me just continue with from where I left. Sorry about that. I didn't see that. I didn't turn my mic on. So increase in the atmospheric CO2 leads to climate warming. As a result, it causes changes in the precipitation patterns. Now, this has a secondary effect. Okay, the effect of increased atmospheric CO2 on land, plants, and animals. So how does this happen? So changes in the plant growth, okay, as precipitation patterns or precipitation over here, we mean by precipitation that rainfall will change over certain areas. For example, in one place there would be more rainfall, in another place there would be less rainfall. So changes in plant growth. It leads to changes in plant growth because of increased precipitation, increased rainfall, or reduced precipitation, reduced rainfall. So different species can shift. For example, एक प्लांट जो एक एरिया में पहले नहीं उगता था वो उस एरिया में उगने लग जाएंगे और एज अ रिजल्ट दे वुड बिकॉज वहां पर उसका क्लाइमेट जो है उसके लिए ज्यादा सूटेबल है एज अ रिजल्ट नेटिव स्पीशीज वुड बी लॉस्ट सो चेंजेस इन प्लांट कम्युनिटी कंपोजिशन जो कि मैं बता चुका हूँ नेटिव स्पीशीज वुड बी लॉस्ट नेटिव स्पीशीज का चेंज अकर हो जाएगा और एज अ रिजल्ट जो एनिमल उसके ऊपर डिपेंड करते हैं चेंजेस इन एनिमल कम्युनिटी कंपोजिशन वो भी चेंज हो जाएगी क्योंकि अब डिफरेंट एनिमल्स वहां पर उस हैबिटेट के लिए ज्यादा सूटेबल है या नेटिव्स को जो है वो एडवांटेज अब नहीं रहेगी जो पहले उनको एडवांटेज हासिल थी एज अ रिजल्ट चेंजेस इन टेरेस्ट्रियल फूड वेब डायनामिक्स जो टेरेस्ट्रियल फूड वेब डायनामिक्स हैं वो चेंज हो जाएंगे एंड एज अ रिजल्ट इंक्रीज